Hello and welcome to AM Language. Good morning, everybody. I hope everyone is well. If we look outside today, it is another gorgeous day. Beautiful sunshine, lovely weather. It's the sort of day you'd want. Um, to be honest with you, it's just the sort of day that you really would even like to go to the beach. It's a lovely day in Malta today. I hope everyone is well. Um, now, at the start of the lesson, what I would like to talk to you guys about is, and this is quite important, please make sure you have checked your emails. Yesterday, we sent emails out regarding lessons next week. So if you are currently, if you're expecting to receive an email, please check your emails because next week in the morning you will have lessons, Zoom lessons, starting next week. So please check your emails. Okay. Now that has been shared. I mean, next week, later on today as well, I will post the times for next week because in the afternoons at 4 o'clock, I'll be giving online lessons as well, YouTube lessons. But we will be having Zoom lessons in the morning next week. So please check your timetable. And hopefully it goes well. It's exciting that we are now in a position to do that. We're still waiting for some people to come online, so I'm not going to start the lesson just yet. We'll wait just a little bit longer before we start. Now, just as a reminder, what we have been doing this week in Unit 4 is in this unit, we were talking about society. We have been talking about society. The first day, we started off talking about the state of a nation. And this is where we started off by looking at some new words and new vocabulary. We then went on to look at some grammar where we looked at so and such. And then the other day, we started to look at something called the big issues as well. Now, today, what we're going to look at is something called make a difference. And in this lesson, we will look at some new language, but we're also going to look at comparatives. In particular, making comparatives with the linker of the article the as well. So that's what we would be looking at today. Now, with making a difference, in this case, we're talking about well, first of all, we need to talk about what we mean by making a difference. You hear this a lot, actually, in films, pop culture, the idea whereby your action has a positive impact on something. Now, making a difference, you could make a positive impact, you could make a negative impact. If I think of certain films like I recently watched, last week, I watched Rambo, one of the Rambo films. And you have Sylvester Stallone playing Rambo, John Rambo. And there's a line in in this film where he says, or someone tells him that you either live for nothing or you die for something. And of course, John Rambo then decides he's not going to die, but he is going to kill a lot of bad guys. Sylvester Stallone knows how to make entertaining movies, a bit like Arnold Schwarzenegger. They're entertaining to watch. There's nothing realistic about it. It's a bit like when you watch Rocky movies. I love Rocky movies. They're great. They're great entertainment. It's not realistic boxing. It's not a realistic boxing match, though, is it? So But we often hear this term make a difference when we are talking about society. I suppose at the moment there is this idea of make a difference by staying at home, don't go out, protect yourself. So there's that element as well. Andrea says, hi, Andrea, good morning, hope you're well. Um, so let's we've now waited for about 5 minutes, so let's begin. So we've got this idea. First of all, let's go through some of the, we've got this question 1, which asks an interesting question, especially for the present as well. The question is, do you think the future of the world is bleak or bright? And then it asks you why. So let's ask that question for ourselves as well. Do you think the future is bleak or bright? And then it asks a question, why? Now, just to explain, if something looks bleak, let's say the future, if we say the future looks, now that's the verb that goes with the adjective bleak, looks bleak. What bleak means is bad, not promising, negative, of some kind. So that's what we mean by bleak. If we say the future looks bright, what we are saying, bright is something good, positive, optimistic. Optimistic, maybe reason to be hopeful, maybe. So that's what we mean. We've got bleak, which is negative, and bright, which is positive. Now, if you ask someone today, does the future seem bleak or does the future seem bright? That's the other word we can use, seem. So we've got, do you think the future looks bright? We've got looks bright, and then we can also say, does the future seem bleak, or does the future seem bright? So these are the other two words. So you can use the verbs seem and look. Seem and look. So if you ask someone today, for instance, does the future seem bright? They might say, because of COVID-19, no, the future seems bleak. However, at the same time, you might ask someone, does the future seem bright? And they might say, yes, the future does seem bright. Yes, there's COVID-19, but there are lots of opportunities that are out there for us to be excited about. So it depends on your perspective. But in the comments section below, in the live chat, let me know, do you think the future seems bright, or do you think the future seems bleak? Let me know. Let's have a look at some examples as well. And maybe you might want to give me your answers in relation to the different topics I'm about to say. So, rising population. Okay, so what do you think of the following global problems? Do we think the problem makes the future seem bleak, or the future seem bright? So we've got a rising, so here it says rising population. I don't know, actually, if I don't know what the facts are about the population. I don't know if the population is rising, or if it's sort of plateaued, or if it's going down. But do you think, in terms of do you think the future is bright in terms of the population of humans on Earth? Do you think there's a lot of things to be excited about? Do you think it's a good thing? Who knows? So that's one subject. Then we've got extreme poverty. Now, I would say that at the moment, because of COVID-19, I think this is one area where we can say the future for poverty at the moment looks bleak, um, especially in in certain cities. I know the poverty situation in a place like Los Angeles, for example, is very concerning. It's very, very worrying. And during this period, especially with COVID-19, I would say the future for those people who are in poverty in LA, the future must seem bleak. I think it would be a rather bad time to be poor in America. Um, I have heard that if you don't have medical insurance in America and you go into hospital with COVID-19, it might end up costing you something like $30,000, apparently. That's just what some news articles are saying. I don't know the reality, of course, but if that's the case, then the future definitely seems bleak there. We then have hunger. Now, you have this world hunger issue. You've got people who are hungry. And again, during COVID-19, maybe the future here when it comes to food might seem bleak. On the other hand, maybe there's an opportunity. Maybe there's an opportunity to improve one's diet, for example. Maybe it's an opportunity for us to eat well. Maybe there's an opportunity for us to rethink the way we eat, perhaps. I was talking to a friend yesterday evening who is in the food industry, and we were talking about the benefits of eating food when the food is in season. Or when the food is from the natural area. I will always say that when I went to South America, tasting fruit in South America, like the pineapple, it was like tasting pineapple for the first time. I didn't know pineapple was so delicious. Um, so I think it does depend where you're from in the world. If you are from South America, you have a fantastic range of food. You really do. If you're from Italy, you have a fantastic range of food as well. I think when it comes to Italy, there's something about Italian food which is just brilliant. I've also heard that in Italy, they have a really interesting law whereby if you are homeless, you can be given food for free by supermarkets. That, if that's the case, I think that's probably a good thing. I think that is, in fact, a good thing. Let's look at the next one. Now, here we have conflict. Does the future seem bleak when it comes to conflict? I don't know the answer to this one. There's certain parts in the world which are in conflict. Now, when we talk about conflict, we're talking about military conflict. Now, there's obviously some places that we automatically think of, but I don't know if the future is bleak or bright in terms of conflict. Then we have child mortality, rather a bit of a downer, really. I imagine it depends what part of the world you're in. I'm going to add mortality rate. It's quite a heavy subject, really. In some parts of the world, child mortality, the child mortality rate is not bad. It's actually quite. There's very few deaths, in which case we could say that's bright. But if you come from other parts of the world, maybe from certain third world countries, then the child mortality rate will be high, in which case it would seem bleak. Then, as it says here, page 38, by the way, I'm looking at page 38 in the upper intermediate books. You then have the topic of AIDS and malaria. Now, interestingly enough, I would say AIDS is one area where, if I were to read the latest medical reports, I think the future seems bright. Um, I think there's recently been an interesting development when it comes to treating AIDS. So I think the future is bright there. I don't know about malaria, to be honest. Okay. And then it asks us question 3. How easy is it to solve the problems? Andrea has said, instead of I think, I know what you were trying to say. I think, yeah, that's just a typo there, isn't it? So I think the future is uncertain because of COVID-19. Yes, I agree. Things which people believed impossible, now they are happening. Yeah, I agree. I mean, we are looking at a situation that in some ways is a bit like, it's something like we would watch in a Hollywood film. This kind of apocalypse situation where it's no longer safe to go outside. It's no longer safe to have your normal job, for example. So it's an interesting time. One of the things I would say that is very important is, now I'm speaking in terms of someone from the UK, for example, because of Brexit, certain jobs were being what we would use as overlooked. They weren't seen as important, such as cleaners, nurses, um, supermarket, people who work in the supermarket. They were not classified as important jobs. COVID-19 has shown that the government was wrong. The British government was wrong here. Your cleaners, your supermarket staff, your nurses are essential workers. They are important. They are the people that can keep a country going when everything else stops. And I think for them, although it is a very dangerous job to be doing at the moment, I would like to think there's hope that those jobs are given more respect in the future. Um, in the UK, for example, nurses are only paid 22 to 25,000 pounds a year, and in London, that's not enough. You can't live off 22 or 25,000 pounds in London. It's far too expensive. But But after this, maybe they will get the pay rise they deserve. Maybe they will get the level of acknowledgement that they deserve, because they have done a fantastic job, and not obviously just in the UK, all over the world. We can see in Italy that the medical staff in Italy have been incredible, superb. Same in Spain and same everywhere. So I hope that in future, the nurses, for example, do get the the, the acknowledgement that they really deserve. They've done an incredible job. So how? So number 3, it then asks us again. We're still on page 38 here. The question is, how could these problems be solved? And how easy? Well, let me know what you think in the answer, and how easily. Well, I will say here, let me know your thoughts to this to the answer to this question in the live chat below. Um, if I'm being honest, I don't think any of these problems are easily solved, and I think some of these problems are so complex, so complicated. Um, I don't know if we are in a position to solve any of these problems. I think I think there's always a good thing to remember. I can't remember who said it, um, but I think it was a psychologist, and the psychologist was saying that um, he was talking about psychology in relation to political thinking, and he said that I think his name was Jordan Peterson. I think it was Jordan Peterson who said this. He's a Canadian psychologist, and I recall him saying in an interview that whenever you think of making a positive change in the world, think of how bad it could go. Think how badly it could go. And I think that's not a bad idea to think about. It's a bit like business. When you go into business, you have to think of the risks, and it's a risk game. So this is what you want to do. This is what you want to achieve. But what are the risks? How wrong, how bad could it go? And I think that's an important thing to think about. It's easy to think of the positive change that we think we could make, but what about the mistakes we might make? How bad could it be? And in the end, I suppose it's a question of, do the risks outweigh the benefits? If the benefits outweigh the risks, then you would say, then the action you want to take is good. But if the risks outweigh the negatives, then you might say, maybe it's not a good idea to go for it. So that's what we can talk about here. We've got, you can say that the risks, do the risk, we can use it in terms of a question actually. Do the risks outweigh the benefits, or do the benefits outweigh the negatives? I'll just write this in over here, and that's a good way to think about things. Okay, it's like a balance scale. That's what we're talking about. It's like a balance scale. So then let's move on to number 3. So here now we're looking at part 3, and it's got some things here. There's some words in bold that we have to develop. So first we're going to look at the new words, and then we're going to look at some grammar using comparatives with the article the. So let's begin by looking at the new words. So the first one is, how extreme poverty defined and how many people suffer from it. So we've got this term extreme poverty. First of all, let's look at this word extreme. Extreme is something that's not in the middle. It's at one end or the other, okay? And then, so an extreme is when something is at the, it's at the end of something. To give you an example, you could say, if we're talking about politics, for example, you would say communism is extreme left, and you might say Nazism was extreme right. So it's at the extreme end of a scale. It's nowhere near the middle. So when you have the term extreme poverty, you're talking about people who are very, if not actually, you're going to say who are extremely poor. So that's what you're talking about. But the question is, how is extreme poverty defined and how many people suffer from it? Well, as we've just said, extreme poverty, this talks about people who are extremely poor. How many people suffer from it? I have no idea. The next one says, in the next question here, it says, what does Jeffrey Sachs describe as a relative? Okay, so here it's talking about an article. So on page 39, you have a reading. And this is a reading you would need to do with number 3. So we'll just go with the terminology in bold, and then I will leave you guys in your own time to read the article on page 39. So I'm just going to go through the terms in bold for you. So when we have the term relatively straight forward, relatively straightforward, okay, it's important to remember what this term means. Relatively is the same as saying it's kind of straightforward, it's kind of simple, or it's kind of easy. It doesn't mean it is, but it's kind of. That's what we mean by straightforward. It's not it's not too difficult in some sort of way. So then we have number three. Number three, the term is what two things does he see as interconnected? Okay, interconnected. Okay, so if you say two things seem interconnected, what you're really saying is that there are two things that are linked and maybe depend on each other. So, as a simple example, you would say, if we're talking about making a difference, if we're talking about political issues, there are two issues that are interconnected, and that is pollution and poverty. So, where there is poverty, you will have a great amount of pollution, and you might have a great production of pollution as well. In a typical or waste, actually, should I say waste? So pollution in terms of waste. This is where we're talking about, like, let's say where plastics, where your rubbish goes. So there are certain countries which collect more rubbish than everywhere else. But then you have in the area where the rubbish is being put, you have a large area of poverty around that area. So I have seen quite a few things where people claim that poverty and in some way pollution, in some form of pollution, they are connected. They are interconnected. They are the problem. To solve one problem, you have to solve the other problem. And that's actually another way of looking at it. To solve one problem, you have to solve the other problem. Another example that is interconnected might be drugs and crime, for example. In order to solve a certain type of crime, you have to solve the drug problem, and that is interconnected. You then have number four, and in number four, the statement is, what is the first step to reverse the downward, downward spiral. Okay. Now, down. First of all, spiral is this, because you like have a staircase, for instance. You have stairs, and you've got stairs that go round and round and round. Now, a downward spiral means something that's just getting worse, something that is getting worse. Reverse is just like a car, but in this case, it's to stop. So to stop things getting worse. That's what we mean by a downward spiral. To reverse a downward spiral is to stop something getting worse. Now, for instance, if we're talking about COVID-19, an action that was taken to reverse the downward spiral of so many people getting the virus were for governments to lock down countries, to stop movement, to ask people to stay at home. So that was an attempt to reverse the downward spiral of the number of people catching the virus. Then what truly makes a difference? Well, this is actually quite an interesting question to ask here. What truly makes a difference? To make a truly, obviously, is the reality, the truth of something. Okay, so the truth of how to make an actual difference. Well, you will have some people who might say the best way to make an actual difference, it starts at home. Like there's a phrase in English, for example. I'm sure you might have a similar phrase in your own language. Charity, for example, charity starts at home. Um, some people would ask that all forms of making a true difference starts off at home. It starts off with yourself. So can you make the difference with yourself? If you can, then you move on to the people with whom you live, your brothers, your sisters, your parents, your children, your wife, your husband, your immediate family. And then from there, your friends, your local community. So what actually makes a difference? People will say, start off with yourself. And that's not a bad idea. If you want some change to happen for the better, maybe it is better to first ask yourself, what changes can you make that are for the better, and then go from there. So in the case of COVID-19, it was to start off by staying at home. Can you protect yourself? If you can protect yourself if you can protect yourself, then you are in a position to protect other people as well. So that's what perhaps we can mean. Then we have number 6. In number 6, it's asking, what 3 things led to better harvests? Now, just to explain what we mean by harvests, this means when, for instance, crops, vines, some kind of food is picked. So, for instance, let's say wine, because that's what I know when it comes to farming. Wine harvest, for example, when it comes to wine in Europe, is typically speaking, it's going to be around October. That is when harvest is going to be. The grapes have been on the vine for a long time. It's enjoyed, hopefully, a good summer. The sugar level is just right. And so therefore in October, that's when people pick the grapes. So that is when harvest is. I think if you're in the southern hemisphere, like Argentina or Chile, Australia, New Zealand, I think harvest tends to be around this time of year, March, April, if I'm not mistaken. Typically speaking, I think it's usually more in March than April. So that's what harvest is, when you pick the food from the ground or from the tree or from the vine. Next, number 7, we have this term, which is an adverb first. Actually, I'll put the whole sentence in here. What has been successfully implemented? What has successfully been implemented? That's quite a sentence there, actually. Just to give you an idea, okay. When we talk about the word implemented, first of all, implemented. So this here is a passive present perfect. I'm going to work backwards. Implement, to implement, okay? To make something, be it an idea, a plan, a system, to work or to start using. So implement, to implement, let me write this in. implement. Sure, I've got the M in there. To implement is to start something. Let's say a project, an idea, and therefore it begins to work in some sort of way. So that's what it means to implement. So you can implement a law, you can implement a political policy, you can implement an idea in the way your team at work operate. You can implement a kind of thinking as well. And obviously, successfully is the adverb of success. So it means it works. So that's what we mean there. And finally, number 9, we have this sentence here. We have, what is 700 billion, and what does the writer compare it to? Now, compare it to, or compare something to. When we compare something to, it means we take one thing and we compare it to another thing. Now, let's see, I'm going to use a simple idea, okay, when it comes to comparing something to something. I think animals are a really good way of as an example here. So if we compare, let's say we take what happens, for instance, what happens when we compare the great white shark to the orca whale, which is also known as the killer whale. It's my favorite animal, to be honest. I absolutely love whales. And the orca whale, or also known as the killer whale, is my favorite animal. So what happens when we compare the great white shark to the orca whale? So first of all, let's talk about size. Well, the great white is a very big shark, but we do know that the orca whale is bigger than a great white shark. So on size, we can say most of the time a fully grown adult shark compared to a fully grown adult orca whale, the orca whale is going to be bigger. So we can say the orca whale is bigger. Then when we talk about the brain, if we compare the great white shark's brain to an orca's brain, we can then, again, we can say the brain of an orca whale is bigger than a shark's. Then if we talk about hunting style, for example, which hunting style is better? Well, a shark hunts alone. It's very effective. It's got really big teeth. It's got a big mouth, and it's a trained. It is nature has a shark has evolved to kill its prey very, very well. So it's an incredible animal. But an orca doesn't hunt alone. An orca is a sociable animal. And if there's one orca, there will be other orcas as well. So an orca hunts in a family. Now, a family of orcas is called a pod. Okay, so you can say the shark hunts alone, but the orca hunts in a pod. So you have a pod of whales. You can have a pod of dolphins as well. So because whales and dolphins hunt in pods, so groups, we can say again the orca's hunting style is better because it gets to it has tactics. It doesn't have to work alone. It works with its family. And then we can say, well, Do sharks eat orcas? Well, if the orca is alive and it's in a pod, no. A great white shark is not going to try and attack an orca, a fully grown adult orca, especially in a pod. But would an orca attack a shark? Well, if the orca is alone, maybe not. But orcas again, they are in pods. So would a pod of orcas attack a great white shark? Yes. Now there was a really interesting case of this off the coast of San Diego. I think some tourists saw the result of an orca pod having killed a great white shark. Really interesting. So if you like wildlife, like I do recommend watching it. If I can find the link, I'll add it to the video. I've always thought it's really interesting. So that's what we are doing. Now we have an idea of this language. So when you come to read, when it comes to reading the article, that is on page 39. Read it, but now you know what these words in bold mean. So let's move on to the next bit of the lesson, the articles, and how we can use them when trying to compare. So, for example, here it shows on page 38, it's got a thing. Can you match? If we look at these two examples, and then we need to work in pairs. So can you match each of the sentences in the grammar box to one of the graphs below? Okay, right, interesting. What kind of words can follow each comparative? So let's have a little look at what these sentences are. So look at the examples, then work in pairs. Can you match the sentences in the graph? So let's see. Maybe my version is missing this. Actually, let's go with this. Okay, A. Got the higher the child mortality. What have I written there? Rate is, comma, the higher the birth rate. Okay, so this is interesting already. What we can say here is the higher the child mortality rate is, the higher the birth rate is. The higher the birth rate. Here we can ask the question, are the two connected in some sort of way? Or interconnected? We could ask that question as well. B, we've got the more secure parents feel, the fewer children they have. Interesting. Again, we would have to ask, are the two interconnected? And C, we have the longer we wait, comma, dot, 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 the larger the long-term costs. Oh, well, here we go. Well, that's a very much of a relevant question at the moment with COVID-19. Now, let's first look at this. We can show how two or more things change at the same time using a pattern with the plus the comparative. So what we have is the plus the comparative. Now remember, with the comparative, we're talking about an adjective being linked with either the er or more or less side of things. So that's why we have the higher, the lower, the more something is, or the less something is. So that is how we're doing it. That's how we're doing it. And what you'll also notice is that the sentence is divided. So first you have the first part with the statement of the blah 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 blah, followed by a comma, followed by the second part of your sentence, starting with the and whatever it is. Okay, so for example, what can our own examples be? Well, quite simply, at the moment, the longer the COVID-19 crisis goes on for, the greater financial, let's say, the greater the financial crisis worsens, for example. So the longer the COVID-19 crisis goes on for, the greater financial crisis worsens, for example. That could be one example. Another, the longer the virus continues, okay, the greater number of people will be affected. And that's how we're doing this. That's how we create it. Let's go with your turn. So what I would like you to do is I'm going to give you two things that are going to be connected, and I would like you to try to create your own sentence. So let's compare two things. Let's say, let's talk about isolation, okay, and health. Let's say we're trying to make a sentence about, I tell you what we'll do is we'll build this up. First, I'll write part of the sentence, and then you guys need to finish the sentence, and then I'll let you guys try create your own sentences as well. So, something, okay, and something. So we need two words here. And the second word has to be related to with long. So longer, we are inside something, something, something. Okay, frustrate is the verb. We will become. Okay, so you need an article. You need an article again. Okay, let's see what you guys can do. Can you complete the sentence? Something, something. Now, the word we're looking for is related to long, so we have to think of the comparative form of long. So something, something, we are inside. Oh, I should say inside is meant to be, yeah, inside, one word, not two words. Longer we are inside. Oh, Okay, right. You might have heard me just say the answer. Nonetheless, maybe you didn't. So something, something, we are inside. Something, 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 we will become. Now, the second part of this sentence, you need the article, and then it's a type of comparative. The word that we're looking for is frustrate. Actually, that should be frustrated. I should have just written frustrated. Anyway, think of the adjective form of frustrate. We will become. So let's see what you guys create. Can anyone here try and complete this sentence for me? Let's see if you guys can complete it. Who will be first? Maybe it will be Andrea. Maybe Andrea will be first. Or maybe someone else will be first. Let's see what you guys write. As I wait for you guys to try and write your answers, I'll just remind you that today at 2 o'clock, there will be a 45-minute video to do with speaking in relation to developing your ability to speak in job interviews. And then at 4 o'clock, there will be a 45-minute lesson on how to improve your writing when it comes to writing to apply for jobs, for example. So that's yet to come. That's going to be later today. Later on, I will be posting on AM will be posting the times for next week in terms of YouTube lessons, and don't forget to check your own emails about with regards to lessons next week. So don't forget about that. So let's see. Can anyone complete this example here? Can anyone try and complete? So Irina, hello Irina. The article, okay, so the longer we are inside, the being the article, more frustrated we will become. So well done. Excellent, Irina. That is the correct answer. So the longer we are inside, the more frustrated we will become. So well done, Irina. That is a perfect sentence. Excellent stuff. You got the article right. You got a longer right, and well done. You used more frustrators. So that is the answer. Well done. We've got a few minutes left of the lesson. So if you would like to give me your own example of something, please do. And we will see what you guys end up producing. If in the meantime I can think of an example, another example for you guys, I will do. Maybe I can think of an example now. For instance, let's say the topic is like sun. The topic is sun bathing, for example, and you need to link. There we go. Here's an example. So I've written key aspects of the sentence here. So let's see if you guys can put this into some kind of sentence. So the topic is going to be sunbathing. There's something to do with longer in the sun, more burnt you'll become. So let's see if you guys can put that into an actual sentence using this comparative form. Let's see what you guys create. Maybe Irina, you would like to have another go. Maybe Andrea, you would like to. Let's see what you guys create. It'll be interesting to see. I don't know how difficult this language is. I think it does depend on a few things. It depends on how comfortable you are using comparatives. I think it also depends on if you come from a language maybe where you do have articles or if you don't. I do know that if you speak Ukrainian or Russian or Turkish or Japanese, you guys don't have the article there. So this might be a little bit difficult. Having said that, if you understand the structure, then it won't be too difficult. So let's see what you guys end up creating. So this is what I want you to do. We only have 5 minutes left. The topic is sunbathing, and you need to try and put together this sentence. There's something to do with longer in the sun, more burnt you'll become. So let's see what you guys come up with that one, and then that will pretty much take us to the end of the lesson. One of the things I hope to do next week is I will probably go through some of the videos I've made, and I'll see if I can find 5-minute clips of the various videos to make it a bit more digestible. So, Irina, well done. The longer you sunbathe, the more you become burnt. More you'll become burnt. Ooh, really close, Irina. I really like that. The first part is correct. The second part would be the more. You've got two options. Either the more burnt you'll become, or the more you become burnt. Those are your two options. I would say option one is the one I personally would go for me. So I would personally say the more burnt you'll become. The more you'll become burnt. You can say that, you can get away with it, the meaning is there, but grammatically speaking, and also in terms of just how a native would say it, I would say go for number one, the more burnt you'll become. So I would encourage you to use that, but really well done, Irina. I think that's an excellent effort, so well done. So guys, that brings us pretty much to the end of the upper intermediate lesson today. So for remainder, just remember at 2 o'clock today, there is a speaking YouTube video, how to improve your ability to speak in a job interview, how to talk about yourself. And then at 4 o'clock, there's going to be another lesson which is related to email writing and applying for jobs as well. So for those of you who joined today to watch this YouTube lesson, upper intermediate, thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining. I hope you have a good day. Happy Easter. If that's something that if it means something to you. If not, then have a good day nonetheless. I hope you enjoy the weather. And thank you very much, Irina. Thank you for participating. Thank you, Andrea, as well. Thank you for participating, and anyone else who might be watching. And yeah, I'll see some of you guys later today. Have a great day. Take care. Be safe. And I'll see you later. Please, if you haven't already, please like and share the video. And bye for now.